Everyone, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks. I think I was amazing, incredible, and beautiful, I heard. So I'll take all of those compliments this morning. Before we get into today's session, I just wanted to clarify that there has been no involvement or no use of ChatGPT in the preparation of this presentation. In the spirit of kickoff, here we are today. I'd like to kick off and reset some notions about publishing and news. From a scope perspective, news is so much more than just the breaking news. There are so many categories, verticals and segments that are focused now that are engaged in every single day of a reader's news environment. From a format perspective, advertising inventory and the typical formats of digital and print ad buys are no longer a thing. It's so much more than that, whether it's deep content partnerships, all the way through to understanding and using first-party data to better target and segment your audience, or whether it's integrating the podcast versions of our national major news brands' mastheads. It's so much more and it's evolved, which is why, obviously, news is the unsung hero from all parts of the funnel, and that's what we want to reset today. Whether it's brand recognition, which is traditionally known for, all the way through to the bottom of the funnel and the conversion and sales performance criteria. So just to reset on publishing and news and what it is in its typical form or how we categorise it. Again, it's not just the breaking news, it's not just printed news, it's print, digital, social, how people read and engage with news on all segments, all categories. And you can't beat its reach. Every single day, every single week, every single year, millions of people, many Australians, engage with the news. So much more than many people think, which is why we're trying to reset the notion of no longer people read news. Very, very strong reach. Table stakes components. And I always like to put it in perspective of let's not always compare against other media outlets or channels because we are part of an ecosystem. If you think about what else we do on a typical day, news is consumed and read by so many more people than those who drink milk, and that's all forms of milk, just to clarify, oat, almond, soy, the list goes on these days. Unbeknownst, and for those parents in the room, many more than eating vegetables, many more than listening to radio, yes, we have to put in there, but also drinking coffee, and again, many varieties of coffee these days too. So news is consumed far more than people think, and again, it's not just the breaking news. Table stakes that you have the reach capability, but is it remembered and does it have the impact? Last year we researched or released some research which really showed across all forms of brand memory. On the left you'll see the short-term memory, which is the typical recall component and recognition, all the way to on the right, which is the long-term memory, which is the purchase propensity and the brand lift components. And you can see in news environments, irrespective of short or long-term memory, it's remembered and it has impact. But does it actually work? Again, typical questions that people ask. Last year we also released research which put in the bang for your buck component. And there is no, you're not in the red, you're always getting a positive return when it comes to news. This is an example across a number, and this is all Australian brands, many campaigns and millions of dollars, and the return for news is significantly strong. So when we talk about the bottom of the funnel component, it does drive your performance and your return on investment. So, the reset and the notion of news is so much more than just breaking news. There's so many more formats to think about these days, and that it does drive all parts of the funnel, show that, again, the research we released last year, that the media mix is a little unbalanced, and it's time to reset that notion. The optimised mix for Australian media buyers or Australian brands is to be putting 7.5% into their media mix allocated towards news if they're going to maximise their bang for buck. Now, obviously that changes by category and it goes much deeper than this, but the average is 7.5%. But you don't need to hear from me. There are many more people, much smarter, much more eloquent than me in the room. I'd like to introduce other perspectives, not just the industry perspective. So today we've got the lovely Renee Sycamore, from Executive General Manager from NewsAmp at News Corp, and Lisa Day, Director of Content Partnerships at Nine, to help understand their involvement in this space. And we've also got a CMO perspective here from one of the lovely indie agencies, I might add, who gives their interpretation very briefly about what they think news is.
What Total News gives you is this great diversity. You know, it's not just about being on the front page or on the landing page, it's also about what's in the lifestyle section, what's in travel section. So you get all these great opportunities and different opportunities to connect with your consumer or with your viewer, and they can really put your brand into their life.
So that's one part of the Brains Trust. The other lovely ladies on stage, who are also beautiful, thank you very much, incredible and amazing, are on stage here. So thanks for joining us. I know it is super busy for you guys right now, and it's a little bit weird talking to you from afar. So if there's a mic there, I could switch. There is, let's do that. Renee, if I could start with you in terms of how you would describe the news and publishing landscape in 2023.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. Listen, I think we're quite primed. I think we're well positioned to tackle 2023 and beyond. Creating compelling and highly engaging content is our core competency. Our revenue source against that core competency is mature. It's highly competitive, and if you listen to the industry experts, we will only see single-digit growth, within that area. So where we see the opportunity in 2023 is around commerce. If you think about the massive volume of back catalogue content, if you think about the massive volume of content we produce every minute of every day, and you look at that being viable to be transactional, commercial, we believe we have a real leadership position to take in 2023 into commerce media. To put it, I think, in a bit more colourful language, where we see 2023 is news publishing moving from a billboard to a shop front, where we seamlessly integrate and blend and sell your products within our brands and within our platforms and networks. And that's really what Total Commerce is about, and Total Commerce is where you're going to see us start to shift and play. We want to be able to start working with you from, amplification top of funnel all the way down to transaction at the bottom of the funnel.
So it's really taking the friction and the steps out of the process and making it all happen within news, which is kind of cool.
Making it very seamless, yeah. And I think you mentioned before, we want to kind of rebalance that media flywheel, back in favour.
Yep, nice, like it. Bottom of the funnel stuff too, I love it. We talk a lot about content and content partnerships, and it being more than just advertising. Lisa, of the last 12 months and an example of a good content partnership and how those integrations have worked.
Well, we've put some examples up here that both Renee and I will talk to. I've the incredible privilege of working across integrated campaigns, and I think this is where also news comes to its own in terms of its diversity of what it can offer. Up on the screen you can see there was an amazing campaign. I think you'll all agree, and I'm sharing this from the learnings, particularly I know it's from a larger agency. We've got some other stuff to share with you, but the banks coming out of the Royal Commission were in a really tricky spot. The consumer trust wasn't there for them. And CBA came to us and they asked us about aligning with a movement as such, right? And it was around coercive abuse. Now, I think one of the things, and I'm sure you've all been frustrated at times when you come to us and we say, well, we can't give cash for comment, we can't, cover that topic. Because it was financial abuse that then led into coercive abuse, we could really deliver this surround sound of conversation and education to an audience that will educate others. And if I look at some of those stats, there was a 38% lift in brand perception for a CBA off the back of that campaign alone. So, really strong, and that's typically what you'd expect from news. But touching on the next slide, if I can, Even if you don't go deep into a content partnership, there's still ways I think you can harness news that have some fun, but give you that cut through. And I love the most recent one you see over there. We all know Novak and his stance on vaccination, and Sportsbet were really clever, you know, and they brought context around the tennis and the AO to push through like that campaign about no vax and donating money to the vaccination program. And again, another one, you know, making fun of Trump in and around the US election. So I think, you know, and Renee will share some examples of some lifestyle examples. It's not as narrow as people think, but it's definitely as incredibly impactful if it's delivered in the right way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, listen, like Lisa, we've got a number of fantastic examples and case studies we can draw from. And for both of us, obviously the success of our clients is the best part of our job. I've got one in particular that I'd like to talk to today that is from this cohort, from the IMA cohort, and that is Yalumba Wine. Now, in 2020, Chimera and Anna in particular, I'm not sure if Anna's in the room, but if you are, hello Anna. Anna approached us with the objective of driving the premium perception of Yalumba Wine. Now, we're very fortunate to have 16.5 million Australians engage with our digital network on any given month. Obviously, that gives us extremely rich data, but what it also allows us to see and tap into is Australian mainstream culture. And what we saw in all of that data in the midst of the pandemic is far from Australians' quench of desire to travel from being dampened, it was heightened. And the data we saw showed a couple of really interesting areas that we ultimately end up tapping into. The first was the travel. We saw a huge spike in search on domestic travel and travel within a kind of limited postcode from where somebody lived. And we saw a huge spike in international food recipes. So people were travelling through their stomachs. So what we did is we merged those insights and we built a campaign, a content-led campaign that was a combination of a bespoke digital bag. We had premium video content. We had a huge amount of editorial, sentiment and support around that social. And what we were able to do was inspire Australians to travel to COVID-affected or lockdown-affected areas, to experience their own backyard, to wine and dine, in those areas, and always with a glass of Yalumba. We had some amazing results, and in fact, we've been in partnership with Kantar for 3.5 years and have just under 100 content campaigns that have been measured independently. This was record-breaking and delivered the best results for us in any Kantar campaign. So I'm just going to read three big stats. So we had an increase of 20% in brand consideration. We had an 8% lift in brand favourability and 9% shift upwards in premium perception, which, as I mentioned, was the core objective. So you don't think this was a one-hit wonder, because I know a lot of people were drinking in COVID lockdown. I think the statistics were something up around 237% increase in alcohol household consumption. Year two, the Chimera team and Anna and her team set some pretty high benchmarks to deliver in year two, and we were able to deliver those in year two as well. And year three is currently in play.
I'll probably just add to that, if I may. I hope you get the impression we both are pretty confident in the results that news can deliver, and we both have invested a lot into effectiveness studies and being able to come back and share numbers with you to prove the proof points around the value that this audience can deliver for you.
I think that's a really good point, and it shows that it's more than just the advertising in its traditional environment as well, right? So the Sportsbet example is good, that it's in a finance section, which is not typically Sportsbet, but they've found the link, and it still has its relevance. Not everything's just the front cover or the homepage takeovers, which is nice when it comes to budgets. A lot of this comes down to the fact that the other asset that news and publishers have particularly strong is the first-party data component. Lisa, do you have any, in terms of first-party data and the value it can bring?
Yeah, look, I think everyone knows at Nine we spent a very long time authenticating our audiences across our digital products via our user wall, registered user wall, and that's given us a great data lake, really. We've consolidated that and centralized it with our DMP, Adobe Audience Manager, those data attributes, and then, you know, really supplemented by a third-party data that really makes it quite, I would say, unrivaled. You've got partners like Equifax, Flybuys, Near, MasterCard to really enrich that data. And it's going to keep happening, you know, and what that means for you, as you know, is we can target very succinctly, you know, people at the right place at the right time with the right message. And really our goal is to deliver a really strong alternative for you, the best in class for data targeting versus like Google and Facebook in an environment that people trust simply and continue to trust.
Well, and often subscribe to in itself, right? So
Yeah.
it's a known customer in a much deeper level than a traditional just you've got their email.
Yeah, and probably editorial. I think news would be doing it as well. Editorial use this a lot in terms of surfacing that content so it's personalized for readers, so you get greater engagement. There shouldn't be under delivery of campaigns. It also means, like on a really macro detail editorially, they're changing headlines if they're not getting the traffic to ensure that they're catching those eyeballs. And there's a modernization out of that. That data we're capturing, we're using for our own benefit to drive future users. So that's about the legacy of, you know, the audience we're attracting.
It's almost a guaranteed audience, right?
Yeah.
It's a sure thing, so it's really nice. You've got the mass reach, but you can go hyper-targeted and guarantee it. Renee, let's switch it up again in terms of looking forward with the industry. In terms of adapting and evolving and innovating, it's something that we've had to do. Everybody has to do, every channel has. How do you think this is going to play out?
Yep. And you're right, Vanessa, the only constant is change. And listen, I think what we've seen is, you know, we've seen a mass, you know, convergence of both our consumers and our advertisers to further down the funnel. Largely, you know, and more recently, it's been out of a comfort zone from a news publishing or news media perspective. You know, pushing ourselves, you know, down to the funnel has been a little bit out of our wheelhouse, I think. But it's definitely something that we're all reinvesting back in. I know, you know, Lisa's business is, and I know some of the other partners, you know, Seven, 10 and ourselves are investing heavily here. If you look back, you know, cast your mind back, you know, maybe a decade to the classifieds, which I know sounds like forever ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. If you look at classified sections, they were mid-funnel and they performed, you know, exceptionally well. But largely, in the last 12 to 15 years, we have been a lot more dominant in that top of funnel. And in fact, you know, and I'll speak probably personally from a news perspective, we've probably had 85% of our function and play at top of funnel and E15 bottom of funnel. That is absolutely going to change and is changing. There is, and I can't plot still from Paul Blackburn, who's about to roll out Decoded in a couple of weeks because he would have my head for it. But there is a significant investment in technology and in the way that we are going to work with our tech and data partners to move significantly, you know, down the funnel. We've seen a lot of revenue dollars shift there with the, you know, digital moves and last click attribution. And we need to, as I said before, we need to, you know, rebalance that flywheel, and we need to do that by answering the needs of, you know, our advertisers and our customers. So, again, I know it's a bit broad, but I've always warned within an inch of my life by Paul. But there will be a lot, and you know, and I'm aware of some of the stuff that Lise and her business are doing. That you're going to see a big play into this space from media publishing.
Thank you. We're running tight on time, and I'm conscious that you guys get to your drinks. We wouldn't want to get in the way of that. So I'm going to merge the last, if you can both have a comment on the last, I'm going to merge two questions. One is, what's the key takeaway? What's the one message you want everybody in the room to be aware of off the back of our discussion today? And second, 20 seconds on ChatGPT.
fun. Okay. Probably simply, I hope you recognise there the confidence that we both have in our platforms and our products and our commitment to delivering results. News, you're probably well known, it gets 3 times more attention by nature just because of the product it is. And I know sometimes that scares people because they think, gosh, I don't want to put an ad for Flight Centre outside, if there's an airline crash. Frankly, we're not doing our job if we're not keeping you across that. We're not doing our job if we're not reaching out to you and asking to move that. We do that, we pick up the phone. But what you're getting is cut through. And you can do that in a playful manner that I showed earlier, or you can do it in an in-depth, thought-provoking, change of perception with something that's a bit more meaningful. Or as, Renee was talking about, transactional in terms of delivering results. So don't be afraid of news, because you can harness it for good and impact, would be my leaving message. And GPT, well, actually, I'll come back to that. You answer first.
Thanks, Lise. Listen, I think kind of the big takeaways that I'd love to leave with everyone is that news actually is not a platform. It's not a platform. It's a thriving ecosystem across many platforms. Print, TV, audio, digital, social. It is a consistent high performer. If you actually look at audience volumes and audience engagements over the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, it is very, very consistent, which is really, really important in brand building. It works for both short and long-term campaigns. It's adapting. It is absolutely adapting to meet the needs of our customers and our advertisers. I said to Vanessa before, I'm going to be a bit crude and say, news it's a bloody sure thing. It really is. So I think, have that at the top of mind. And last, just a bit of fun. News is not full of middle-aged white men, and this is nothing against middle-aged white men at all. I love middle-aged white men. It is not full of middle-aged white men, and it's not created, the content's not created for middle-aged white men. I'd love people to see the people that I get to work with every day. It's very diverse, and we are absolutely here to create great content for everyday Australians.
So GPT, look, 9, like everyone's watching that. It's too early to kind of have an opinion on it. But interestingly, funny enough, AFR ran a poll, a reader survey, right? We know AFR, leading business decision makers, and asked them what they thought about it. So what was interesting was 39% of them said they were really unsure and it was a wait and see. Now, these are decision makers in the business market. 35% said they thought it could be used for good, and then I think the leftover. It was nearly split into 3s. People were really unsure, and it was a wait and see. So it's early days. So we're not rushing into it. We'll have to wait until it's right and decide what it is. But we're not. We're keeping an open mind.
Well, I'm personally obsessed with it, and I'm driving everybody mad using ChatGPT for everything. And listen, I think the great privilege of working in this industry and how quickly things move is we're all going to have the privilege of watching what ChatGPT can do for us, for our businesses, for functions within our businesses. At the moment, it is very much a complementary tool, and I think if you know where and how to point it, it is very useful. It's definitely, I can't see, not in the immediate future, not replacing any of us, but if we use it well, I think we can really get a leg up. From a business perspective, we're definitely experimenting, as you would imagine, in the newsroom. So there is, experimental programs happening right now. But we're also looking at it for, we've got events and experiences within News Corp. We even mucked around with a brief. We got a brief from one of our clients, and we threw the brief into ChatGPT, and we actually got some pretty good ideas. So I think let's wait and see and use it as a complementary tool as it evolves, and we can all evolve with it.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for having us. Hopefully you got a lot out of today.